Hi, everyone. This is Michael, and I am thrilled to be here to be launching the second season of the Inspired Adventures podcast. And this season, we're calling it Sharing Science. And today, we have a really great example of a project that is sharing science with the general public. I'm here today with Ashley Moseley, who is not only the marketing director for Inspired Adventures, where you've probably heard her voice on podcasts, and you've definitely seen her influence on our websites and all of our materials, but is also the author of an upcoming book called Nacho House Cat. And this is a really fun project, and I can't wait to dive into it. So before we begin, though, let's start by talking and saying hello to Ashley and learning a little bit about her. Hi, Ashley.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to talk with you. I know we talk a lot because we work together. But I'm excited to talk more about this book and how the book's gonna have such a huge impact, and also how it kind of ties back with IE and all of the amazing stuff that IE is already doing.
My first question for you today is going to be something pretty simple. We've been talking about this for a long time, but I really want to understand your passion for why you want to write a children's book. We'll get into why we want you to write a children's book, but why do you want to write a children's book?
That's a great question, Michael. So I've been wanting to write a children's book for years and years. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and when she was a baby and toddler, that was one of our most cherished times together, reading books. She loved the rhyming books. They made her laugh. And, as a parent, watching your little kid laugh is just, I mean, it's everything. So I sat down numerous times. I had a very specific notebook and I would write my children's book ideas in there. And sometimes I would write a little bit about that topic and then I'd kind of get frustrated with it and just put it away. So it never ended up getting done. Fast forward to about 3 or 4 years ago, I start working with IE and I come into IE, as a marketing person, not a scientist. So I did not know a lot about jaguars. I didn't know a lot about animals that, weren't animals that I encounter on my day-to-day life. So that was kind of a slow process. And through like designing this graphic or helping with this project or that project, I learned a little bit more about these kind of animals here and there. And so I guess it's been eight months or so when I really thought, okay, IE, like a big part of IE is education. The founders are educators. Like how can we put all of this together and move IE forward, but still do the children's book that I've always wanted to do? And I think that's about the time I came to you and I was like, well, what if we just wrote a children's book about jaguars? And so here we are.
And here we are, exactly. We actually have a publication date of July 23rd. So we are here. So this book that you had this idea about, okay, this is kind of fun. It's called Nacho House Cat. And I'm going to admit, when you first gave me the title, I thought it was kind of silly. But then again, I am the scientist and not necessarily known for creative type things sometimes. But tell me a little bit about why Nacho House Cat? What's the story behind this?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, Michael, because I love this part of it. So, I feel like science can sometimes be a hard thing to put in front of kids because it's learning. And all kids associate learning with going to school and getting up early, and nobody likes to do that. So I was thinking, how can we make this fun? We want kids to be like excited about it. And so I kept going back to the idea of jokes like that's nacho cheese, those kinds of things. And I started thinking, okay, well, if we're writing for kids and kids, they do know cats. Most kids have a pet cat or a pet dog. And if they don't have it, their grandma does, or their friend or their neighbor. So they know about cats, but they most likely don't know about jaguars because it's not something that we encounter normally, unless, of course, you're at the zoo. And so I really wanted kids to see that they are cats. So they're part of the cat species, but they are nacho house cat. So while they are cats, you cannot bring them in your house. You cannot treat them like you would your little cat. And so I thought that nacho house cat was kind of a fun way to make learning fun.
I think that's great, especially from our perspective. One of our big projects is the Human Jaguar Conflict Program in Belize, and it's working with the Belize Zoo. And when that name is a little bit misleading because they sometimes say they deal with problem jaguars, right? Well, there are no problem jaguars. There's jaguars that unfortunately have had interactions with humans, and usually because the humans don't understand them. Even the country of Belize or in the United States where you're not going to see jaguars, you may be wondering, why don't we just put them all in zoos or something? So I think that books like this, which are designed to, start to educate people at a very young age, that learning things about them is fun. And you've placed a decent amount of science facts inside of a very small book.
There's a lot of learning to be had in just those few pages, but I think it's very important that children, like I said earlier, not only understand that they are considered cats, they have a very important role in the world that we live in, but there's also a certain amount of like we can appreciate them for the magnificent, beautiful creatures that they are. But I also want kids to recognize that they are not these, we can't bring them home and cuddle them.
Well, you shouldn't, right? I mean, you probably could, but you
You
shouldn't do
probably could.
anything
It
for
would
that.
be a very bad idea.
Very bad idea. So we're going to shift gears here just for a second. We're going to come back to this because I want to ask you a little bit more about the illustrations inside the book in a little bit. But I really want to kind of get this out there because I think you had a real turning point with regards to this book. We talked a lot in the beginning about publishing a book, and we even had you came up with some crazy deadlines of like 3 weeks, and you're going to write it in a month, okay? And we're sitting here a couple of months after that, and worrying about the process about becoming an author. But you had a real motivational moment, okay, I believe, and I'm going to take a real guess as to when it was, when things kind of like shifted into high gear for you. And that was with a very, very young jaguar by the name of Philly. Can you tell me a little bit about Philly, what you know about her? Okay, but more importantly, how did this little jaguar, okay, who's in the human jaguar conflict program at the Belize Zoo currently, how did that change things for you?
Oh, I just love Philly. I just love her. So I was working on some marketing material for the Belize Zoo and for IE, and you had sent me a picture of Philly, and oh, to this day, like that is one of my most favorite pictures. Like she is just, well, if I can for a second, if we can go back to the Habitat for Jags program and just speak to the fact that I feel like Jaguars they get a bad rap in the sense that, they are super powerful creatures and they can do a lot of damage. Um, but they're so amazing. And so I think it was that photo of Philly for me that like I just looked, it's like an up close picture of Philly. And yes, she's a very big jaguar, but you see that cat face. You just see like she is still just an amazing creature, and she has a different role than normal house cats play in our world, but she is she'll just melt your heart. Like she doesn't look vicious, and she doesn't look like, I mean, like their jaw strength is crazy strong. Like they jaguar could do some massive damage if that's what they chose to do. But when you see this picture of Philly, and I have worked with so many marketing pictures of different jaguars, and I think they're all beautiful. They're all a little bit different as our cats at home are, right? That's another kind of parallel. But I don't know. Like, I think so many people are scared of them because they are big, and you hear this story and that story. But when you see that picture of Philly, you're like, oh my goodness, like she is precious.
I think we all have one of those moments with Jaguars. Everybody at IE does, where we first see our first Jaguar, okay, or first our first encounter with them, and you realize that the amazing nature of them. They are an impressive creature. And when we say human jaguar conflict, okay, it's usually, like I said, it's usually humans causing conflict with jaguars. Jaguars are generally fairly peaceful and rarely have anything to do with humans unless they absolutely have to. So I think that's an interesting story. I'm glad that had that moment. I kind of knew it was. We kind of planted that on you to get you moving a little bit. So with Philly. Okay, so becoming an author, okay, joining the club. Everybody at IE, all three of the founders are all associated with publishing. So we've been in this game for a long time. It's always fun for us, especially me, okay, to see that spark, okay, the initial idea of being able to put your thoughts on paper. And so I'm going to ask you a question, a fun one, okay? Now you're soon to be a published author, okay? And tell us about what you thought of the process versus what you expected.
Oh boy. Okay. So I was like, oh, children's book, whew, that's a breeze. I can knock that out like real quick. I really thought it would be like, I sit down and I write this today, and then, I get an illustrator and, give them a week or so, and they just put some stuff together, and then there we go. That is absolutely not what the process looks like.
I'm close.
No, no. It's an awesome process. It really is, but it is a very long process. And there are days that are trying, just like with anything. Like if there's something you really, really want, there are always going to be little obstacles and things to overcome. It was a lot longer than I thought, but also it's like seeing the images and the text and everything put together, and seeing it, start to look like the book that I had in my brain. It's even better than I imagined. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, on some level, I'm a little thankful for the process, because you know what? The person that I was in that mindset of, I'll write a children's book in a day and then we'll just draw some pictures and put it together. I have I have so much more I have so much respect for authors and illustrators than I did like when I started this, but I don't think the book would have turned out as great as I feel that it has turned out in that initial mindset that I was in. Like, that, oh, we can just crank this out and it's going to be glorious. Because over the last 6 months, we've rewritten text and then gone back and forth about illustrations. And it looks a good bit like what I thought it would. And it looks a good bit different. And all of those things make it this wonderful book that I am incredibly proud of.
I can remember we were probably a month into this book. You had written the first couple drafts of the text, and it is a children's book, okay, but it's even though it's not hundreds of pages long or something, it has a really important message and it's very visual, which we'll get back to in a second. But I remember we were probably about 3 weeks in, and you had already written the text, and you're like, okay, so I'm going to start the next one now. And I remember thinking, next one, what? Right? The next book. You were like, this is done. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna knock these things out. I'm like, oh, okay. And then just even this couple of days ago, we were working on the revised version of the final proofs, right, as we move forward. I thought, okay, we'll see how this goes. Okay, next book. And I really do hope there is going to be a next book, because I know what some of your plans are, but we'll save that for maybe a later talk. I do
Yes.
want to take a moment, because you and I have recently sat down with David Taylor, your illustrator, and
Hmm.
the success of any children's book is obviously based largely on the work of your illustrator. And not just the science content, which we were obviously involved with, and the authoring of the text, but the visual aspects of it. And David brought a unique perspective to this. So what I want to do is just take a few moments and play that interview for our audience, and we'll be right back. Here today with David Taylor, the illustrator of Nacho House Cat. Hi, David. Tell us something about yourself.
I was a librarian. That was my profession, but I always loved art. I always painted on the side, did things for friends or paintings in my house or whatever. But I thought I would write when I retired as a librarian, but painting took over. So since 2001, I've been calling myself a painter, an artist. A friend did a story about dogs in our church and wanted me to illustrate it. And I thought that'd be wonderful. A children's book about dogs romping around in the church. And so we did that. I just did watercolor. It was very easy because I could make the dogs look exaggerated. I put them in environments that people in the church would recognize. And so it wasn't much work to it. And so we sold it to members of the church and got our money back, basically. So when Ashley asked me, would you like to do a children's book? The idea of jaguars in a zoo in Belize, I didn't know much about that, but I thought, well, I can learn. So I started doing sketches. In fact, first of all, uh, Ashley and I did a lot of conversation about her story. I did a lot of sketches. I have reams of sketches of jaguars and cats and little girls holding cats and so on. Uh, but there was a problem. I found out fairly soon after I got started that Michael didn't want my comic versions of Jaguar.
It wasn't I didn't like them. Okay.
This is one of my favorites.
I remember that one, yes.
I do remember that one too.
And this one, yeah. It turns out that Michael wanted scientific illustrations, practically. And I thought, okay, how does a talking jaguar be scientific? How do we do that? Do I make his mouth move? Does a human face with a jaguar body? And it took a while for me to figure out how to do this. And so Ashley and I talked about this a while, and I came really close to just resigning, saying, Ashley, I don't know how to do this. I'm sorry. I think I need to quit. And overnight, I said, I can't do that to Ashley. She's put so much into this, and she'd have to find another illustrator. So I'll have to learn how to do it. So I'm
going to say that you did an amazing job too. You really did.
that
From
was
from the early ones, and I imagine that the earlier versions would have been absolutely incredible in the book. Okay, but I really the accuracy and the beauty of what you bring to the Jaguars in the main book is really it's simply amazing. You did a great job. So sorry to put you through that.
this is my first. Okay, can I actually do a jaguar that looks like a jaguar? So,
Yep.
um, um, and that made me feel okay. I can do this. But I was going to use watercolor, an easy thing for this kind of project. But I took some watercolors I'd done for some of the pages and took them to be scanned at Staples. And the colors just did not come through. They were not bright enough to do the job for a children's book. And so that's when I decided it had to be acrylic on canvas. So that's then they go back also to I still had the quandary, how do we do this? And actually suggested that the jaguar can be in the house, not in the jungle, in the house. And that sort of opened up everything. Okay, so I can actually use my own interior house and put jaguars in it. And so that's what led. And then I think I invented the term house cat house. I
Yes.
thought this house could be 4 house cats, so 3 house cat hats. So anyway, um, that led to what transpired.
Well, I got to mention to everybody that who's listening that when they see this book, they're actually looking at, I believe it's 29 canvases, correct? I mean, not the ones you threw away, but there was actually 29 separate images that were painted. Okay, so it's not in the day of digital manipulation. Okay, these are actually painted, and usually
Right.
many times, as you're mentioning, David, because often I would come back and say, that's not a Jaguar, right? And I'm sure there was much throwing of canvases around. Okay, understandable. Okay, but I gotta tell you that the colors, you feel almost the texture of the canvases inside of these things is simply amazing. I can't wait to have you see it, okay, and have everybody else see it too. I have a couple questions for you, okay, as well. And some of these parallel some of the ones I've been asking Ashley too. So, you know, we built this book for a very specific purpose. Ashley had a dream, and we decided we'll roll it into it. Inspired Adventures, our big Jaguar conservation and education campaigns, which is really a cornerstone for one of the things that IE does. And what we're always interested is when we take people on these journeys, whether to Belize or Ashley wanting to build a book, and we take her through our vision of what we'd like to do, is at the end of this, when you look back, how did this type of project influence your understanding of jaguars and their place in the world? What do you think now? I mean, did you spend a lot of time drawing jaguars? And obviously, you did a lot of research on jaguars because the pictures are great.
I didn't know anything about jaguars before. I mean, I knew the name and I knew that they were a big cat, but I didn't know about their place in the world in relation to tigers and leopards and lions and so on. So it was interesting to find out. They were very impressive. They climb, they swim, they are the chief predator of their environment, and that was also an interesting problem for me talking to Ashley about this because we don't want kids to be scared, and yet they're scary. So how do we do that? And that was, I think, having him in the house was probably the answer to that. Having him just do things in an ordinary environment that still illustrated his tech. By the way, have any of you wondered why the front cover and the back cover, the house is leaning?
I am an artist. I don't question those types of things. I stick with questioning jaguars. I'll let Ashley answer that one.
Well, no, I mean, I had that thought, but again, I mean, I figured there was a reason, but I just kind of figured it was just part of like the artist's expression. But I'm guessing you have an answer for us. So,
Well, it just happened. And then I discovered, oh yes, that's right. Because it's fantasy. So what happens in the house isn't real. It's a fairy tale. Yet in the house, everything is like it's real. So we want it all to happen, but we're getting the information about jaguars across, and the information is accurate, but the story itself, the where it occurs, is just something that's invented. And that's I just realized that about the front cover, and I said, "Oh yes, okay." So the back cover has to repeat that.
I like that.
It's a children's book, okay, and it's been very lovingly and with a lot of labor prepared, okay, by the two of you. What would you want to be the takeaway message of this work to the general public? Like,
Jaguars are unique. They're wonderful. They're amazing, and they need to be protected.
I think that comes through very nicely in the book. I think the art does a nice job of showing that, at every stage, the jaguar inside the house is in a very, very uncomfortable place, right? It doesn't like to be there. And every time you put them outside, they seem much more relaxed, even if it's just inside the door, right? Just laying there with his head inside the door, right? It's very happy being on the outside of the house. And so are the other cats happy to see it on the outside as well, obviously. So,
Yeah.
and some of those cats in that were actually based upon your cats, I understand too.
Yes, although I used illustration every place I could find them, photographs of cats. But yes, there's a cat in my wife's lap that actually ended up in a little girl's lap. Yeah.
Great. That's great. Well, I know that I want to say how much that the team at Inspired Adventures appreciates what you've done. This has been a passion of ours to reach audiences of any age, to build things that push the educational boundaries and bring what would appear to be very different groups together. And having the chance to work just as even as a science consultant in this book and having Inspired Adventures involved with it on behalf of me and both the other founders of the company, I can't thank you enough for the work you've done. It's absolutely gorgeous. Okay. And I can't wait to get out to see the general public.
Glad you like it.
Thank you, David. That
Can't
made
wait to see it.
I can't wait either. It's been a long process. So, okay.
Well, and I just want to say thank you, David. Like you did an amazing job. Like you really brought this book to life and I love it. I love the canvases. So I picked up the canvases for Michael yesterday and they're already in my office and I want to frame the cover to hang in my office as well. So I'm pretty excited about it, but thank you, David.
As you can see, he is a very creative individual and gave a lot to this. What would you have to say about David's work?
Well, I absolutely love David's work. I think my most favorite thing is that they're paintings. These are actually paintings on canvas, and it's not to me, that's just an extra level of talent, and it gives this book dimension, I feel like Michael said. I mean, children's books, the content, even though we have a lot of good science content here, and I'm very happy with the content. I feel like the illustrations just kind of take it to a new level, and then add to that the fact that they are hand painted. I
These aren't
just
CGIs. Everything nowadays is CGI'd, right? You're gonna have, you can Pixar anything, right? I mean, I'm not knocking Pixar because I'm not obviously Pixar, but this is hand painted. So whenever we made a change, which happened regularly, he literally had to go back and scrape canvas and repaint,
yes.
not just select and delete. And they are impressive. And I think it was a great choice. In the beginning, I was questioning it and not David's ability, but the idea of how we were doing it. But I think in the end, you have a very visual book, which really does look very nice as well.
Well, thank you. I think so too. And like I said, I love how it's like the paintings give this book an extra element of texture. I don't know how to describe it, but trust me, when you get your copy, you guys will see what I'm talking about.
Can't wait. So, in Inspired Adventures, we spend a lot of time trying to look at innovative ways of approaching science education. We're all teachers who have been here for years and done almost anything creative we can to reach people. And I think that this book does an amazing job, okay, of introducing people to one of our passions, which is jaguar conservation. So, what would you want, okay, to be your legacy, okay, of how this book could enhance public awareness of jaguar conservation? What would be your dream with a student being or student or reader seeing this book?
I want young readers to be excited about science and excited about learning about the wonderful creatures that are on this planet because there's a lot of them and I like starting with this. Well, I like this for a lot of reasons because I love the Belize Zoo and I love everything that IE is doing with jaguar conservation and the Belize Zoo. And I think that this was a good place to start because kids know cats. They know cats, but they know cats as their house cats. And I wanted them to see a different perspective of cats. They're still amazing, beautiful cats, but they play a different role. And so I really want kids and hopefully even their parents, because maybe they're reading it together. I want them to see that these creatures are incredibly important to our planet, but we have to know how to interact with them and how not to interact with them. And so I thought the best way to do that is to take what kids do know, their house cats, and then explain to them that while jaguars are cats as well, they're still different. And so it's a good lesson on how things can be the same, but also be different.
Perfect. So before we finish up, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to, okay, to thank for this process and everything you've been through?
Oh boy, he says before we finish up, like this is going to be the short section. There's so many people. I think first and foremost, like I'm super thankful for you, Michael, because you are an author and you have not only like guided me even before this book, answered my science questions, and some of them were kind of ridiculous. He was like, "Didn't you learn that in like seventh grade science class, Ashley?" But you've been just a huge resource all along the way, like helping me learn and understand these animals. helping me understand the process, the writing process, the publishing process, everything. And IE as a whole, like Dave and Eric, like all of you guys are so passionate about what you do. And I am living proof that the passion that you three carry rubs off on other people. Like, so spend
Thank you.
enough time with these three guys and you will love jaguars too. And
That's
some
true.
other animals that you didn't know how to name before you met these three guys, but after meeting them, you love these animals. So I'm very thankful for Michael and for the whole IE team. Also, the Belize Zoo. They are doing fantastic work. They love each and every animal that they bring in, and they are just so committed to conservation efforts and to making sure that each animal has the best life that they can. And those of us that aren't at the zoo and see the things that they see, like they do such a good job at helping us see how we can be involved and included. They're just all amazing, everyone at the Belize Zoo. And David. I really do want to thank David because as the author, I did have the ability to go in and highlight and delete and then retype what I wanted my change to be. But David did not. And he spent so much time and energy into making such beautiful illustrations. So it's everyone, and then probably some people I haven't mentioned that have come together to make this book possible. And that leads me to Palmetto Publishing. It has been an incredible experience working with Julia. At first, it was Julia. And then once we got our project manager, Weston, they have been great in guiding us through what this looks like and helping us know, like, okay, now we need you to decide this and decide that, because that's the other thing that I've learned is it's not just about writing the book and getting the illustrations, but it's a big process. There's so many questions to it's like every time I'm turning a corner, it's like, well, you could go left or you could go right. Do you want gloss? Do you want matte? And so there's so many things that go into this, and I'm just very thankful for those at Palmetto Publishing too.
That's great. And thank you, Ashley. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us about your book and for all the amazing things you do for Inspired Adventures. You're a huge part of the whole Habitats for Jags campaign. And I think this is a great story for our Sharing Science season. And I'm looking forward to seeing the book finally in our hands, okay, and getting some copies down to our friends at the zoo and see what they have to say about it as well. So thank you very much, and we will be seeing you really soon.
Let me plug in one thing too. So just in case this comes out before my book release, which again, on July 23rd, so mark your calendars. But I also have a website, ashleymoseley.com, and some little pieces of illustration of the illustrations are already up. So if you just can't take it anymore, you just have to see how fantastic this is going to be, you can definitely check out ashleymoseley.com.
Definitely will do that. Thank you, Ashley. We'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, Michael.
In our next episode, we're going to return back to the Belize Zoo. We're going to be talking with the zookeepers that take care of Philly and learn a little bit more about her story. It's a really special episode. I think you're going to like it. Thanks for listening. If you have a story you'd like to share, please get in touch with me at michael@inspiredadventures.com.